The bright lights of the studio shimmered across the polished desk. Laughter echoed as the cameras rolled. The host, smiling widely, welcomed President Ibrahim Traoré to the stage. Applause filled the room. It was supposed to be a cheerful conversation. A light chat. Nothing too deep. But just 3 minutes in, something shifted. The host asked a question, simple, harmless. What moment in your life changed you the most? Traoré went quiet. His smile faded. The studio fell silent. He looked up. There was a boy, he said softly. He changed everything. The audience leaned in. I was 13, Traoré began. I had a piece of bread he hadn't eaten in days. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from memory. The way he looked at me, not with hunger, but hope, like I was the only person who could save him. He paused. I didn't. The host blinked. You didn't? No, Traoré whispered, and I never saw him again. The camera zoomed in. His eyes were wet. This wasn't politics. This was something else, something painful. Real. No one in the studio moved, and the story was just beginning. The host cleared his throat, visibly shaken. What happened next? Traoré stared at the floor for a moment. Then he looked up. It was a stormy night in Ouagadougou, rain like I'd never seen before. I was sleeping on the floor in a small room we shared with 3 families. My mother had just sold her last bowl of millet to buy me school shoes. He smiled sadly. That same night I saw the boy again, the one I didn't share the bread with. The audience stiffened. He was under a market table, shivering. His shirt was torn. His eyes caught mine through the rain. Traoré took a breath. I walked toward him. I had a warm blanket. I wanted to give it to him. The host nodded, hopeful. But then I saw he was holding something, a wooden box. He paused. He opened it and whispered to the sky, "Maybe this box is where God keeps the children no one loves." The host's hands went to his mouth. I was too ashamed to go to him, Traoré said. I ran. Now, not just the host, but the camera crew, stood frozen. A tear slipped down one cameraman's cheek. Everyone knew. This wasn't just a story. It was a confession. The studio had gone quiet. Even the sound crew wasn't breathing. I never saw the boy again, Traoré continued. But 3 years later I found something. Something I wasn't meant to see. The host leaned forward. My mother had passed. I was cleaning out the room we lived in. Under the old mattress I found a piece of cloth tied with twine. Inside was a letter, no name, no stamp. He looked down at his hands. It was from the boy. The audience gasped. He'd written it, hoping someone, anyone, would read it. Maybe God. Traoré's voice cracked. He wrote, "If I ever disappear, it's not because I was bad. It's because no one looked at me long enough to see that I was good." The host covered his face. Traoré took a deep breath. I held that letter for years. It followed me to school, to training, to the army. He paused. And then, one day, as I stood before my men, ready to defend our people, I realized I wasn't doing it just for Burkina Faso. He looked at the camera. I was doing it for him. The host's voice shook. What was his name? I never knew, Traoré said. But I owe him everything. The host wiped his eyes, trying to stay composed. Why didn't you tell anyone this before? He asked. Traoré hesitated. Because it was too painful, and because I didn't want anyone to think I was using his story to look good. This isn't about me, he said. It's about him. The audience sat frozen. He used to call himself Kofi, but I knew that wasn't his real name. I once asked him why. Traoré's voice softened. He said, if I tell you my real name, it means I exist. And people who exist get forgotten. The host dropped his pen. He was just a boy. But he knew something most adults never learn, the pain of being invisible. Traoré looked straight into the camera. I want the world to know. There are thousands of children like him right now. And we walk past them every single day. The audience began to shift uncomfortably. One woman clutched her chest. A man lowered his head, blinking fast. I carry him with me, Traoré said, into every meeting, every speech, every decision. He leaned forward. You asked me what changed me? He paused. It was the day I realized I couldn't save him. The host leaned in. What happened the last time you saw him? Traoré looked up. It was a Friday. The air was hot. The street smelled like roasted peanuts and dust. I'd skipped school to help my uncle sell water on the roadside. He took a breath. That's when I heard the scream. The room went cold. I ran. A crowd had gathered by the bridge. People were shouting. He paused. And there he was. The audience stiffened. Kofi had climbed the railing. He was barefoot, shaking, but he wasn't crying. He was calm. The host gasped softly. He looked down at the river, then up at the sky. Traoré's voice cracked. He whispered something I'll never forget. He closed his eyes. If I jump, maybe someone will finally notice me. The room was silent. I ran to stop him, but he let go. Gasps filled the studio. He didn't die, Traoré added quickly. The current carried him downstream. Fishermen pulled him out. But after that day, he paused. He was gone. No one saw him again. The host stared in disbelief. I spent years looking for him, Traoré said, but it was like he disappeared into the earth. Years later, Traoré continued, I went back to that same bridge. The host looked up. To find him? Traoré nodded slowly. But what I found was worse. The camera zoomed in. There was a small corner under the bridge, hidden behind cement and rust. And there, I saw something. He swallowed hard. A box, flattened, with drawings. Little stick people, a sun, a bird. He paused. And a name written in charcoal. People only cry when they see your body, not your heart. The room fell into a silence so deep, you could hear someone sniffle in the back row. I knew it was him, Traoré whispered. His drawings, his handwriting. I stood there for hours, holding that cardboard like it was made of glass. He paused. That was his grave. Not official. Not marked. Not remembered. The host's voice cracked. What did you do? I buried it. I dug with my bare hands. Gave him the burial no one else would. Then I stood up and made him a promise. Traoré looked into the camera. I told him, I may not have saved you then, but I will never let the world forget you now. A single tear rolled down his cheek, and that's when the host broke. After burying the cardboard grave, Ibrahim Traoré felt a new weight settle in his chest. Not a burden, but a promise. He swore to himself, I will carry his story with me. That promise grew inside him like a fire. Years passed. School was hard. His family struggled. But every decision he made was guided by that vow. When soldiers came to recruit young men, Traoré didn't hesitate. He wanted to protect those like the boy he lost. During military training, others saw a leader. But only Traoré knew the real reason he fought. It wasn't just about borders or politics. It was about the children left unseen, unheard. He would be their voice. The story of the boy was never far from his mind. Sometimes at night, when everyone else was asleep, Traoré would whisper his promise again. I will never forget you. He kept that promise through every challenge, every hardship, because to forget meant to betray the hope in that boy's eyes. As Traoré climbed the ranks, his heart stayed with those forgotten, children in dusty villages, families crushed by poverty, faces lost in the crowds. His leadership was different. He listened. He fought for justice. But it wasn't easy. Corruption, war, and fear surrounded him. One night, in the middle of a dark forest, Traoré sat by a small fire with his closest soldiers. He shared the story of the boy for the first time. The men listened in silence, many with tears in their eyes. That night, something changed. His soldiers didn't just follow orders, they fought with purpose. Not for medals or power, but for the people, the invisible children. Traoré's story spread quietly. Slowly the world began to see him not just as a soldier or president, but as a man who carried hope in his heart. One chilly morning, a surprising invitation arrived. A popular talk show, known for tough questions and viral moments, wanted to interview President Ibrahim Traoré. He accepted. On the day of the show, the studio buzzed with energy. Cameras clicked. The host smiled warmly. The conversation started light. Politics, peace, progress. But the host sensed something deeper in Traoré's eyes. "So," the host said softly, "what is the story that changed you?" Traoré looked calm but determined. He knew this was the moment to tell the story the world needed to hear. A story about sacrifice, about a boy named Kofi, a story about hope in the face of darkness. The room fell quiet. The cameras rolled, and what happened next would leave no one untouched. The studio grew quiet as Traoré's gaze hardened, the weight of years pressing on his shoulders. He began softly. "The story I want to tell is not mine alone. It belongs to thousands in Burkina Faso and beyond." The host nodded, sensing the moment was turning heavy. Traoré continued, "Kofi's story is about sacrifice and injustice, but also about hope. Hope that must never die." He took a breath. "One day, during a violent raid in a small village, I saw families torn apart, mothers screaming for children who were lost, fathers standing helpless as their homes burned." The audience shifted uncomfortably. I was a young soldier then, ordered to hold ground, but inside I felt powerless. Traoré's voice cracked. Kofi's face appeared in my mind. I promised I wouldn't let his story end forgotten. The host's eyes filled with tears, but he kept silent. Traoré's words hung heavy in the air. This moment made me see our fight differently, not just for land or power, but for human dignity. The room stayed still. The true story was only just beginning. Traoré reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn envelope. "This," he said, "is a letter I found years later, written by a boy like Kofi." He slowly unfolded the fragile paper. The words were simple but powerful. "To anyone who finds this, please know that we are here. We are alive, even when the world forgets us." The host's voice trembled. Who was it from? A boy who never got to leave his village. His family was caught in the crossfire. He wrote that letter, hoping it would reach someone, anyone. Traoré looked up. "I carry this letter with me, a reminder of the invisible children whose voices are drowned out by war and silence." The audience was silent, some blinking back tears. Traoré's eyes shone with determination. "This letter gave me strength when everything seemed lost." He folded the letter carefully. "It's a call for the world to wake up." The host's composure broke, and he wiped his eyes. The host cleared his throat, trying to regain control, but the tears kept coming. "Ibrahim," he said, voice shaking, "your story, it's more than history or politics. It's a human story. I'm sorry, I didn't expect this." Traoré nodded gently. "Most don't, but these stories exist every day. Invisible, painful." The host's tears fell freely now. "You've changed how I see everything." The camera zoomed in. For millions watching, this story is a mirror, reflecting forgotten lives, forgotten hopes. The studio remained hushed. Traoré's voice was steady, yet full of emotion. "My hope is that no one watching will turn away from the pain of others." He leaned forward. "Because when we ignore suffering, we all suffer." host wiped his face. "And Ibrahim, what will you say to those who think change is impossible?" Traoré's final words before the break were a quiet roar. "Change begins with seeing, with remembering, and with choosing hope, no matter how dark it seems." The audience was left breathless. Ibrahim Traoré's eyes darkened with a mixture of pain and determination as he leaned forward. "The burden I carry is not just mine. It belongs to every soul lost in the shadows, to every mother who still waits for her child's return." His voice was low but firm. "I was young, angry, and full of hope when I first wore the uniform. But that hope was tested beyond words." He paused, looking at the host who was now silent, tears still fresh. "In that village, I promised myself to be a voice for the voiceless, those crushed by injustice, forgotten by the world." The studio fell into a heavy silence. The truth is, leadership isn't about power. It's about sacrifice, about making decisions that weigh on your heart every single day. The audience was captivated, feeling the raw honesty. Traoré's hands clenched softly on his lap. I carry their stories with me, as a reminder that change isn't easy, but it's necessary. A tear slipped down his cheek, barely noticed beneath his calm exterior. Traoré's gaze softened, memories flooding back. Kofi was just a boy, no older than 10. His eyes held fear, but also something else, a quiet strength. He swallowed hard. Before we left the village, Kofi grabbed my arm. "Don't forget us," he whispered. The host's voice cracked. "And you never forgot?" "No," Traoré said firmly. "I made a promise that day, to fight for those like him, to ensure their suffering is seen and heard." The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the studio lights. That promise shaped everything I did after. Every speech, every decision. It was for Kofi and children like him. His words echoed in the room, heavy with meaning. I carry his memory in my heart every day. It is why I stand here, vulnerable and truthful, sharing this story. The host wiped his eyes, nodding slowly. The viewers could feel the depth of the moment, a leader who truly understands sacrifice. Traoré straightened, his voice rising with hope. This story isn't just about sorrow, it's about what can come next. He looked directly into the camera, as if speaking to every viewer. We cannot heal if we stay divided. We cannot build if we forget the past. He paused, the weight of his words hanging. But if we unite, across borders, cultures, and differences, we can build a future of dignity and peace. The host moved beyond words, nodded silently. This is a call not just for Burkina Faso, but for the world. Traoré's eyes glistened. Let Kofi's story remind us all. Hope lives in unity, in understanding and in action. The audience was spellbound, many holding back tears. The message was clear. The fight for justice was far from over, but it was one they must join together. The studio was silent. Ibrahim Traoré's voice had softened to a whisper, yet every word cut through the room like a sharp wind. There was one night after the attacks when I sat alone on the dusty floor of a small hut. Outside, the world seemed to forget us, forgotten in their struggles. He paused, his eyes distant. I held a photograph of my father, a man who believed in justice, even when the world did not. The host's eyes welled up, and a quiet sob escaped him. Traoré's next words came slow, deliberate. In that moment, I realized leadership wasn't just about strategy or speeches. It was about carrying the weight of every mother who mourns, every child who wakes hungry, every dream shattered by violence. A single tear rolled down Traoré's cheek, a rare break from the stoic leader. That silent tear spoke volumes more than any speech could. The room felt the raw humanity of a man who bore his country's pain, not from afar, but in his very soul. Viewers watching were already overwhelmed, hearts heavy, eyes wet. Traoré lifted his gaze, fierce yet hopeful. This battle, our battle, is often unseen, not fought on front pages or evening news, but in villages and hearts. He spoke of the invisible scars left by war, children too young to understand, families torn apart, futures stolen. But amidst this darkness there are rays of light. Teachers who risk their lives to educate, doctors who heal with little to give, communities rebuilding from rubble. His voice grew stronger. We fight not for glory, but for the right to live with dignity, to laugh, to dream again. He looked directly into the camera. Every small victory, every act of kindness is a step towards the future we deserve. The host, now wiping tears, struggled to keep composure. The audience was spellbound, caught between sorrow and hope. Traoré's story was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone who believed in humanity's strength. The moment had come. Traoré took a deep breath, steadying himself. This is why I say to you all, no matter where you come from, what you believe, or how small you feel, your voice matters. He smiled gently, tears shining in his eyes. In unity we find strength. In compassion we find hope. And in our shared humanity, we find the power to change the world. The host, overcome, wiped his tears and whispered, "Thank you." The screen faded, but Traoré's words echoed. Viewers were left breathless, hearts stirred. The story was not just a tale of pain. It was a call to action, a beacon of hope. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe now, because stories like this deserve to be heard by the world. Drop a comment below. What part touched your heart the most? Your voice matters. Together we can spread hope and make a difference.